good. Awesome.
And yeah, this session is really built around iteration, around product craft, and what that means coming from a founder perspective, not necessarily an individual contributing designer or engineer. So, there might be a little bit of a high level focus on what that means, again, coming from a founder perspective, but encourage all of you to ask a bunch of questions around iteration and product. I want to keep it focused around that. I don't really want to talk about fundraising. That was last session. We had the VC in the room. That's when you should ask those questions. And then there's going to be sort of a surprise question towards the end, which, yeah, listen, come on. So I think, just to start, just in case like some folks aren't like familiar with Browser Company, maybe you can just give the Browser Company story and sort of how, I know your personal story, but maybe even how you got all the way up to founding Browser Company, because that's also just, a really sick story. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of Arc Browser Company? Okay, all right. How far back do you want me to go?
We don't have to talk about Penn. We all know what hell that is.
Okay. So
maybe from Thrive.
From Thrive, okay.
Yeah.
So did a bunch of jobs, and each time I thought I knew what I really wanted to do, and I got to Thrive. I was working in this venture capital firm, and I realized at that point, of every place I've worked, in retrospect, when I was younger, I thought I wanted to work on certain ideas or certain places, and it just had this feeling all of my best memories were with certain people, certain crews at certain places, and I know that sounds cliche, but what I realized at that point in my career is I just want to work with my people in the way that makes me really happy. And so my first time co-founder, Hirsch, who I met at an event like this when I was 20 in New York, we kind of met up again. We're like, man, let's get the band back together. Let's do something together. And we had this dream list of people we had met in our career and we had admired in the industry. And we said, let's do something where we get to work together again. And we feel like we can go hire whoever we want. And not whoever we want, everyone would say yes, but work on something so ambitious. First of all, we wouldn't get bored because we want to set up a place where we could work it for a long time. But we also feel like we could go recruit all those people we want to work with again, or have always wanted to work with. And so I was at Thrive. That was kind of in the background, but I didn't want to force it because if you do a startup, a lot of it sucks. A lot of it is anxiety inducing. And so you got to tread very carefully. And when I was at Thrive, my first company kind of came of age in the era of the shift to mobile, to the shift to the iPhone. And it had only been kind of mobile for a while. And I was at Thrive for kind of getting back in the tech for the first time in a while. Man, everything coming across the desk were these web applications for work. It was the Notion and Figma and GitHub and Airtable and all these companies. And that was just really weird to me because you hadn't talked about desktop or productivity software in a long, long time. And it was kind of seeing that pattern and taking a step back and going wait a minute, they're all reliant on this desktop web browser that hasn't changed in a long time. And then you peel back the onion a little further, and the thing that really did it for me was my wife at the time was in the art world, and she was working for the 76-year-old artist in Arizona that was not tech savvy at all. And I watched her. She did not leave Chrome for her entire day. Her whole job, even working for an old artist, was in a web browser. And so you put those kind of three things together. One, working on with our favorite people something ambitious. Wait, everything is now going to the desktop browser, and even people that are not in tech are just spending hours and hours in there every day, and it hasn't changed. There's got to be something in there. And I think the last thing I'll say is, I know some of that probably sounds a little cliche and unbelievable. That is actually the story, which generally was a good thing. But I think a lot of companies start with I have this one problem I got to solve, and I'm going to be narrowly focused on it. We did not have that. We had no compass other than what I told you. That was very special and led to a lot of good things. But for anyone paying attention to us building our second product, a lot of the reasons were man, we kind of got to start fresh. Started in that we didn't actually have a plan. So I'm going to try to be very honest in this room. I always try to, but especially with this sort of in-person. That is something that will come back in the story later if we get there. I hope that wasn't too much. I talk a lot, so cut me off.
No. We got time.
Okay.
We like the raw edit. I think something that's interesting that you said is not only about sort of not having a plan, but also sort of setting out to do something ambitious that wasn't also necessarily just problem solution oriented, right? And so how do you think about crafting, like, this is both ambitious and a canvas to explore, and then how do you not get lost sort of like through that idea maze? That feels like a challenge. Yeah. Maybe starting with actually, like, how do you define something as ambitious? Because I actually think New York builders struggle with scales of ambition in comparison to our SF counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's different for different people in terms of what that means to them or what gets them going. And so I think one of the aspects of this prompt was, if you're a security engineer, for example, like the act of building a web browser, let alone a kind of more futuristic web browser, is super inspiring and ambitious to a security engineer in a way that wouldn't be to me. So I think it's different for each person. I think for me, I was a sociology major in college. Like, I like people, I like culture at the end of the day much more than tech. I actually don't really care about tech. I'm kind of a late adopter in a lot of ways. And so for me, the thing that was ambitious about the browser was honestly the time you spent. I grew up in LA. My godfather was director of urban planning for LA. I love cities. I love spaces. And so again, just seeing my wife kind of like hunched over at a computer for 8 hours in this box, I don't know. For me and my personality, it was like, wow, if you can change that rectangle, like that's hours and hours in my wife and many people's days. So for me, I approach it from a people and a places perspective. Other people on our team see the ambition in the security challenges or the anything else, but that's what it was for me. And I think one other thing I'd say that related to some of your other questions is a very formidable experience in my career, for better or worse, was when I was 20. We were out here in New York. I met my co-founder at an event like this, and at the time I thought, man, everyone was like, you can't build a company in New York, you've got to go to San Francisco. And just through a bunch of luck and intros from different people we happened to meet, got introduced to the co-founders of Twitter outside of Jack Dorsey, Evan Williams, Biz Stone, Jason Goldman. And through a lot, they were like, hey, we're going to seed invest in your company. And actually, we just left Twitter, or got fired from Twitter. If you want to come out to San Francisco, like, you can work with us in the office and, like, we'll help you get this thing off the ground.
Wait, all the co-founders of Twitter got fired from Twitter?
Ev Williams, Biz Stone, and this guy named Jason Goldman.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Founder friendly.
Yeah, it's been a very tumultuous company. But anyways, we move all the way out to San Francisco thinking you have to build a company in San Francisco. These people are like the godfathers of social media. We were doing something like that at the time. And I walked in the room. I was like, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. And Ev specifically was like, at the very end, like, man, Josh, I hope I didn't give you the wrong impression. I have no idea what the right answer is. And I actually have, the people that have been successful know that no one has any idea what they're doing, and we're all figuring it out as we go along, and we all got really lucky. And for that to be like my first, at first I was like, what the I just moved all the way out here because I thought you had all the answers, and you're telling me that you have no idea, no one has any idea that's successful. And even in that, that exact moment, there was a little bit of despair and holy shit. That has shaped a lot of my career and my choices after, of this worldview, which is you kind of just got to wing it. Everyone's winging it. And so I think as it relates to the iteration and stuff we'll talk about, I think that's a foundational thing for me and us has been we have no idea, and so how do you proceed if you have no idea? It's always been kind of core to how we do things. And I just realized I did not answer your question, which was?
No, I mean, I think that's actually a better bridging point, which honestly, I think something that happens in company culture building, right, is a very sort of direction oriented thing, which is, our idea is going to come from the top down in this organization, or is it going to come from the bottoms up?
Yep.
And then when it's time to ship, who's making those decisions?
Yep.
Right. I'm curious, having this experience of no one knows what they're doing, then the humbleness of that means I also don't know what I'm doing.
Yep.
But then the anxiety of, which means my team doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Where does direction come from?
Yeah.
And then how does that actually set a culture for repeated execution?
Yeah.
Towards some outcome.
Yeah. There's definitely anxiety. I think, to also be honest, is I kind of sucked when I was in my 20s doing my first company, and so I guess what I mean by that. Yeah, a lot of regrets. But I think more specifically what I mean is, I wasn't a tech person. I know anything about tech. I didn't hack on computers growing up. I was a kid that grew up on AIM and LiveJournal and MySpace and just fell in love with my iMac and the internet, but didn't know anything really about about the tech world, except for I watched The Social Network once, and like I use Facebook. And so I show up, I'm 20, and I'm like, it was a kind of an accident that I got into even doing a startup. I didn't know I was doing that at the time. So what do? You kind of like, at least for me as a insecure early 20-year-old, I kind of mimicked the people, the role models there, and I thought that was Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs. And so I was just kind of a little bit of an asshole with the first company, and I guess more importantly, I thought what I was supposed to do is have all the answers and be that like ruthless attention to detail, the stereotype. And obviously I was completely wrong. And so I should also say it wasn't just that anecdote from Ev, which clearly I didn't follow at that first company, but that my own lived experience of realizing how wrong that was, kind of like firsthand trying to build that way. So with the browser company, the idea was set that big kind of like goal, that like be on the same page about our values and the ambition of this company, and then hire incredibly multidisciplinary people. That's a big thing. We hire what I used to call mutts. I don't really say mutts anymore because a lot of people don't think it's positive. I think it's positive. Like people that don't neatly fit in a box in terms of their profession. They've always kind of, they tend to have resumes where they have this title at one company and that title at another. But they kind of just like to make things, and they think about things kind of almost in a creative, artistic way, a holistic way. And then we say, kind of go do your thing. And we're not going to talk about things a lot. Just go prototype it. So we have a very prototype-driven culture, and very much a don't talk about it too much, prototype it, put it in each other's hands, and just have an internal system, which I'm sure all of you who work at tech companies, there's probably something similar of just like, let's just play with it. And I'm curious, Devin's here, if she has a different perspective, but there really isn't so much a rigid system. It really is bottoms up. It's really prototypes driven. And then just, I don't know, I would say that so far I've been surprised at how obvious it usually is what's feeling right and what's not. And I think part of the reason is because we picked a category of product where we use it all day. Right, and so I think it's one thing if we were building, software for elementary school teachers. Like it's kind of hard to empathize, but I think because we're all living in this thing every day, it makes it a little easier when you can actually play with these prototypes to know what makes sense. Am I allowed to take questions?
Yeah. Just speak up so we can catch it.
So just double clicking on like this prototyping, giving ideas to people and letting them like play around to it. It feels a little bit abstract. Could you have like a couple of examples you can give here? Just for, like what does prototyping mean? How does that like translate into something like tangible?
Yeah, so an example is in our new product we have this idea of like, so a great example is like we have these conceptions like, oh, maybe there's something around here, this thing. An example of that thing might be like, what if it could be more proactive, right? What if it could just like show up just in the nick of time, tap you on the shoulder with exactly what you need? And so we'll give a prompt like that to a group of people and say, hey, we work in these kind of 6-week milestones. You got 6 weeks, try to figure out if this browser, this product could just like tap you on the shoulder and show up. And so within that, we just let people kind of go off and they can prototype little ideas in the product that do that. And then we live with them for a couple weeks. And one of the things is after many years of trying many of these things, there's almost like this internal intuition and sense of when a prototype gets to the level of interesting. It's not quite voting, but it's like, we have this internal Slack channel where enough people will comment about it, or the same person will come back a second time and be like, damn, I'm like loving this thing. And there's a sort of this shared intuition for when a prototype reaches that threshold. But it does always start to be very tangible with some sort of like mandate or idealism around how it should work. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that kind of
and I guess that is how we since it sounds like tactics are interesting, every 6 weeks we divide people in these little cross-functional pods, we call them. Each one has some high-level mandate like that. And then within that high-level mandate, which you could say is top-down, but is very vague, then it can go wild. So even Devin here is working on a bunch of stuff for the new product, and it's very similar. It's like, we'll go on a walk, I'll kind of like, for like 30 minutes, and from that, I'll be like, cool, let's go try a bunch of things. So sometimes it works brilliantly, and some of our best things have popped out of it. Oftentimes it's like we waste 6 weeks because there was miscommunications. What were you talking about when you're flailing on the walk? I didn't quite get it. So I don't want to like overstate. It's not perfect, but it very much works for us.
Yeah. So the 6 week thing makes me think about two things. One, it makes me think about sort of, not to bring him up, but like Brian Chesky, Airbnb, sort of like treating software as sort of like hardware launches and like taking legitimate amount of time on just one feature, and then at some time scale we're going to launch just 3 things, and that's going to be the event, right? The other thing it makes me think about is basically how counter that runs to how people typically look at sprints, which are like 1 week and 2 week sprints.
Right.
And at that time, we're going to look at sort of, is this going in, does this have legs or not? You're going to slide off into the next thing, or we're going to like polish this up and that's going to like, you know, hit the app store or hit the site, whatever.
Right.
I keep doing this thing where I keep forking you, but
That's fine.
why don't we start with just looking at like the traditional 1 to 2 week sprint structure and why you felt maybe that wasn't right for the browser company culture, and then we can kind of talk about like how do 2, 3, 5 ideas actually make it.
Sure. And so the question is, why not the 1 to 2? Or
I guess like what are the trade-offs that you saw where you said that's not right for us, right? Like pushing weekly or bi-weekly updates to the browser, or to, I mean, I keep arc search on my like things.
Yeah, so I think it's worth noting that we do the 6 week milestones are really just because again, look, it can't be too, in my opinion, so chaotic that everyone can do anything. So the 6 weeks is really just about, it's kind of the one main area where I and other leaders at the company can say, hey, this is really important to us as a theme or a goal. We got to make progress on it. But, you know, especially when, you know, Arc, we were really shipping a lot of updates. As those of you who know, it's like every week we'd have new features dropping. So the 6 weeks doesn't mean at the end of 6 weeks, like everyone's work is done. It's actually much more staggered and natural. And in fact, you know, to the point of long-term stuff, we have some pods or areas that it's 6 weeks, but we renewed it for 1.5 years straight, right? Like we had this effort, this infrastructure effort to take Swift to Windows. That was a gnarly, complex project. So yeah, there were 6 week kind of like, what do we want to do these next 6 weeks? But we would renew it. On the kind of 1 to 2 weeks, at risk of making it too complicated, we also have, it's 3 2-week cycles, as we call them, within that. And so where we don't change the overall goals, but if you go back to what I said, our assumption is no one has any idea what they're doing, including whoever's working on the project at the beginning of the 6 weeks. So the goal of the 6 weeks is really to try as many prototypes as possible. Typically what will happen is, you know, one pod will try 5, 6, 7 different things, or prototype number 3 will hit and they'll spend the last 4 weeks focused on that. So we do still break it up into these 2-week increments just to have kind of little check-ins, but it's not as much change with staffing and goals as every 6 weeks.
Did this hold consistent from like founding, or is this an affordance of team size?
No, this is held, I mean, obviously, first 6 months you're figuring it out. So, but basically, as long as like I can't remember a system that wasn't this. If anything, we probably should grow out of it given we're larger now. But I'm a little stubborn about holding on to the past.
Sure. So then the thing that you kind of dropped in there as well is sort of like these sets of goals that create the prompts or the themes of what these pods are like focused on.
Yeah.
Where does that goal formation happen? Is it sort of, again, not to be so referential, but like, is it like Steve taking like his favorite 50 people to Hawaii? Is it you and the co-founder? Is it you and maybe a set of 5 people that you trust? Is it the whole team? Like, where does goal formation start, and then what's also informing that?
Yeah, it's unfortunately a little fluid. So we probably should be better at planning in a kind of structured way, but it's much more organic because again, there's some things that there are these kind of staggered goals where, for example, for a new product, we want to be really fast. We want latency to be really low on everything, and that's kind of like a permanent thing.
Sure.
So the goals for that, you know, it's like at some point we're like, okay, we're going to make, with this new product, it's going to be really fast. Speed is going to be a feature. You know, at the outset, there'll be some big planning to set that goal. But from there on out, I'm not involved. It's like the engineers working on that will do it every 6 weeks. Maybe to get at what you're probably really asking is when there's something new that no one knew about that we're now doing, where does it come from? That's probably where my that's where I probably have the most influence on what we do. So the one for me, for example, is like I've become just obsessed with personalization. I don't know the right way to say it. I know I'm not saying anything new, but just this idea of like in this new era, can it really feel like the software is like, you know, like tailor-made to you? I just have this like instinct that we can do so many new things there, including in a privacy-preserving way on device that just weren't possible before, or people didn't have the incentives to do, or do it in a way that was really good for the individual. And I've just gotten, this is like, you know, my family goes to bed and like late nights on my laptop in the basement, just like so inspired. And I will come out and be like, team, like I gotta tell you, like we gotta explore this theme. I think the way that works is even though that is top down, it really tends to be at that level. And then we can go to 6 people working on that and go interpret that however you want. Hear a bunch of ideas, but run with it.
Sure. I'll take a quick pause and see if there's any questions from there. Ooh. Okay, thank you.
I'd wonder if you could just kind of riff on your own reality distortion field. So like as you're kind of like, take personalization as an example, maybe it's like, okay, you've got this in your head that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's particularly interesting in your context because you're playing in such a multi-party environment as everyone's building for different browsers, and the world is changing so much with AI around it. So it's like, I guess the real question is, how do you maintain your own reality distortion field as when you get a sense that you're onto something? Like, do you have any practices for yourself in terms of just like, okay, I've got something, this is worth protecting, preserving, like kind of honing as I bring it to the team, bring it into the world?
Yeah, when I'm at my best, I think I have a really clear internal voice at this point in my life, or at least I can know when I'm when something feels. I think if anything, I still believe in the assume you don't know.
Yeah.
But I think I now have a better almost editorial when I see something or feel something when it feels right. In practice, though, actually, I think it's been a big challenge with the past year, as noisy as it's been internally, externally, is at times I can get away from that and not actually. Honestly, I don't always know how to get it back. So, for example, I was actually the past maybe week to 3 weeks have been the most fun I've had at the browser company since probably the first year. As hyperbolic as that sounds for this event, I swear to you, the last few weeks have been really, really fun. And the first couple weeks of this year were really tough for me. And I don't know why necessarily. It wasn't some event. It was just kind of in a funk, and in those moments, you start doubting everything. Honestly, one of the things too is we just started. So that's all to say. When I'm in the flow, I just feel like I have this extreme reality distortion field. Probably I just have this internal sense. The thing I'm trying to get better at, I hope one day I will, is not going in so many kind of highs and lows and getting influenced by things outside. So I'm working on it.
Or at least having a practice to getting out of the lows.
Yeah, and so I have my tactics like everyone. Even for example, I'm going on this vacation next week for the first time in a bit. It's I'm really not going to take my laptop. I got to do a lot of walk. So there are things that I do, but the honest truth is it's kind of you go in and out of it. I was going to say something else, but I forget.
Sean?
I want to go back to the personalization and the concept of tools for people, and I think the browser in some sense felt very unopinionated until Arc in some way, and I think when I hear you say personalization, there's two paths that I hear. It's person who actively creates their tool, so tool maker, prosumer kind of thing, and then there's the speaking of what you said earlier, proactive, the tool is shaped in response to what you do.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, based on what you're doing now, I think it's one of those paths, but just to speak on maybe that.
Yeah, cool. I actually remembered what I wanted to say because it's important, and I'll come back to that. So I'm so sorry. I promise I will answer. Because this is actually a thing that I was thinking about my funk, the first 2 weeks, and why am I feeling good now? And I think there are a bunch of things, some of which I probably don't appreciate. But one was, because we assumed we don't know, and because so much of our intuition comes from other people playing with these prototypes inside and out to the company, this is why from day one, Arc was always so open with what we were building. That was one of the main reasons. It wasn't some long-term marketing strategy. It was we need people to play with it and tell us how they're doing. And a few weeks ago, we started onboarding people to the new product. Quietly, only a few. It's still buggy. We'll get, and some people hate it. And some people love certain things, and it is so energizing and clarifying to have that voice back. Yeah. That even when it stings, it's at least it's real. It's you get out of your own head. Yeah. Devin's been doing a lot of these onboardings. I'll stop shouting you out, Devin. That's Devin, by the way. So that is that I didn't realize how missing that was until it came back recently, and so I think that's part of it.
That's key.
So on personalization, so if you go back to the observation of my wife in Chrome, it was for me the line I used to use early on, I haven't talked about in a long time, is it's almost like with Chrome and browsers, traditional browsers, we're living in these drab hotel rooms where they we can bring our own backpack and luggage, but everything else is the same, right? And that's just so dystopian. Again, if you think about the way that we live in our personal lives and how our homes feel, our living rooms, how intentional we are. And so one of the earliest, maybe even the earliest website marketing lines for Arc was your home on the internet. And that was always an aspiration for Arc, and not even for Arc, but for Arc. Just like, how do we want the browser and our internet to be different? Is like, I want it to be my space. I want to like get to this place. I'm going to spend 8 hours today for my job, and it to feel as me as my home. But if I'm being honest with Arc, we never quite were able to live up to that at the extreme we wanted. We let you change the color. You obviously could rename tabs. We tried our best, but it was a little cosmetic on the surface, and we never quite lived up to that ideal. And so with the second product, and really with a lot of these new technologies, I think both are possible, and I think both are we can lower the barrier. So for what you say is like the kind of more power usery, I want to customize my own tools, that is always going to be sort of a 1%, sub 10% thing. But now that you can use natural language, now that you can use audio input, there's an opportunity, at least like, I don't know, maybe you can double the percentage of people that can have agency over their tools given the ease and then kind of how natural it can feel. And on the flip side, I think the ability to proactively mold something to you is much more tractable. And it's much more tractable on device, especially post DeepSeek, and that things are going to happen. So the answer is both, but what is so energizing is just like, oh wait, now we can do it in a truly new way. Whereas before it was sort of like a teenage dream that like, man, I should have a home on the internet, but we didn't really, it's like, you can have a blue browser, like isn't really what we were going for, you know? Yeah. So again, I don't think we've, like, this is literally like the thing of the week, right? So we have not solved it, but that like, going back to your question, like I will show up every once in a while and be like, we're back, home on the internet, let's figure it out.
So I think that question of personalization is really interesting.
If anyone has a better name, by the way, I don't know if personalization.
And there was a feature that y'all launched. This was, I think, like last year, where like you could sort of like just outline something and be like, I don't want to see this anymore.
Yeah. People hated that thing.
I was one of those people. and not that I hated it. I actually thought it was like I thought it was a good
fine.
Feature. But
I remember the tweet.
You shut your faces! Clapping for that. How dare you? The tweet was a story about the original iPhone. And what they took out of operating system level controls was zooming in apps. Because Steve talked about how if an app designer did not intend for you to like zoom in on this app, maybe it was supposed to be a single view, having it at the OS level wasn't good because it was, quote, designer hostile. And I think that this comes up in a lot of interesting ways, even like with the mobile app, right? Which I have in like my main bar, I use it every day. But what it brings out is this question of like, what does it mean to build on the internet or within the sort of the case that is the browser when personalization is going to shape the very thing I just made as a developer? Like, what is that new relationship we're going to have with building for the internet while that thing is getting distorted in real time based off of people's preferences? Like, how do we start thinking about that? This is kind of not about iteration anymore and more like design philosophy, but they're related.
Yeah. At risk of being a horrible guest, I have no idea.
Word.
But this is what's so exciting. Like, I remember just like that feeling of being in middle school and on AIM and LiveJournal and just being like, damn, this is crazy and a bunch is about to happen. And I love that feeling in my body right now and a little unease about questions like this, but I honestly don't have the answer, and I think it's been a blind spot for us, and I'll say for me, because I think, keep in mind, so our first company, for context, sold to, we got acquired by Facebook. And so I worked at Facebook for a couple of years. And then I was in the Obama White House when Trump got elected. And so I think a lot of browser company also was a little bit of a reaction, maybe an overreaction to what I perceived to be the slights or shortcomings of this kind of tech industry and culture that really I started my career in. And so I think to a fault, we were so ruthlessly and almost solely focused on the individual, almost as like making a point to everything we saw that came before, that when things like, honestly, does everyone know what Reggie is referencing in terms of this feature he tweeted about? No? Yeah, okay. It was a blind spot. Like, I did not expect some people to be pissed about that, because I was so focused on, as a person, why do they think it's okay to like do all this stuff? Like, that's that's hostile towards me. Fuck that. This is my browser. Get out of my house. And so, and I'm saying that as like, obviously that was too one-sided and it was too extreme. But I think because of what our company in many ways was a reaction to, we've always been so focused on what is good for Devin. What is good? What is good for the individual, not necessary for the web. But I think now you're seeing that to crack. So I'm really worried about the web. I think the web, people have been worried about the web for a long time, and it has always succeeded. And so I'm hopeful, but I some of this stuff feels problematic to like the sort of things that have been on my mind is like what comes after the web page. I still believe in an open ecosystem and an open network of information and all the things that web represents, but something about the model of web pages and not to mention the business model feels like it's got to change. I don't have answers to what it is, and honestly, I think need to spend more time here. Even we had a new hire onboarding Q&A this past week, and someone asked a similar question, and I was just kind of embarrassed I didn't have an answer. So maybe on my vacation I'll think about it more. But I will say I'd be lying if I didn't say it's very exciting to be in a moment again in this industry where it feels like everything really is going to get flipped upside down, even if many are going to be in problematic ways. It's just, it's cool.
Yeah, it brings up a good question though of maybe like how we think about user feedback, right? I think a lot of founders have extremely different opinions on how they take in user feedback, if they give a fuck about user feedback. I mean, in my favorite config talk the past year was Jesper, when Dylan was like, how do you think about user feedback? And he's just like, I don't. and he just like, Dylan just froze, you know? Yeah. So yeah, I'm curious how you think about user feedback personally, how that gets incorporated into like the larger sort of like system app browser. And then, yeah, when do you say like, actually, that user is an idiot? Yep. You know, like their opinion literally doesn't matter. Or like this user, you know, this opinion reflects not just their experience, but 20-30% of people's experience, even if they haven't been able to voice it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think similar to the 6-week cycle milestone thing we spoke about, I think we approach it as there are these kind of high-level principles or ideals or values that just are like embedded in what we believe and do, that nothing will fracture, and everything is beneath that, including user feedback. But within those, we're very driven by user feedback. And again, it just comes from I was a sociology major. Like I find technology exciting because of the people, and so one of our first hires was what other people would call kind of a user researcher. Employee number 3, I think 4. And so since day one, that has always been part of our product development process in the exact same way that people internally, we prioritize feedback for them. It's just an extension of that. So I'd say on the spectrum of companies that are driven by user feedback, we're probably towards the end of very driven by user feedback or feedback from people, with the exception of we're not optimizing for certain metrics at all costs, like a lot of places I've worked and seen do, and user feedback drives that and drives those outcomes. There are certain things we just believe and will not cross the line on, but within that, a lot of user feedback. I actually think this is one place that hurt us a little bit, in that our first product, my first company, like within a little tiny circle, people had heard of it, but really no one liked it, like that product. Like our retention in retrospect was bad. We had no idea what we were doing. And so really, I think I honestly had this little chip on my shoulder, and my co-founder as well, with the second company, like let's make something people love. Like at a time I was like, I remember when we did our first onboardings, and it was like, if I could just get 100 people to love this. And to me, 10,000 DAU felt just like enormous. And I was so overly, to a fault, probably focused on building something that 10,000 people loved, that we weren't intentional enough about like, well, who are those 10,000 people? And what direction is that going to take us? Because they're going to invite their friends, and they're going to invite their friends. And so I think that's actually been part of the challenge with Arc in relative to this new product, is that because we didn't come in with a problem we wanted to solve, and because we were just like, we just want people to love this thing, and we want to learn from them until they do, we ended up kind of with the Frankenstein product, which I'm very proud of and I love dearly, and like again, like it's my baby, but I actually think we were a little too driven by that in retrospect. And I think with Dia, our new product, we're still, user feedback is still as involved as it was before, to the point of like me feeling very energized now, but much more surgical about like, well, who are we building for and what do we believe, and making sure that we're not too reactive to just anyone that really likes it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that feels kind of like a romantic relationship. Like it feels like you announced that you were changing, and then these people that loved you were like, "Oh my God, this person that I love is changing."
I got dumped hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that feel like? And then how does that not shake the faith around the new thing? Because I think it's so easy, particularly when you have a team that cares. I'm gonna get to questions. Relax. But particularly when you have like a team, right, that's also looking for this direction. It has scaled up to a certain point. You announce this thing very publicly. There's a bit of a whiplash, and now you have to turn around to that same team and say, by the way, we're still doing this.
Yeah.
So maybe walk us through a little bit of that and what it feels like to. I don't think you call it really a pivot because Arc isn't going anywhere. It's more just like true second product line. But walk us through some of that.
Man, there's so many aspects of it. I mean, you mentioned like a relationship or breakup, but I got 2 kids now, and again, risk cliche. It's like when your kid looks you in the eye and is like super happy about something, the like depth of your happiness at their happiness is insane. It's just wild. And the inverse is true. Like my son got home from school the other day, and you could tell like his favorite friend like kind of dumped him for some other friend, and he was so sad. And it was so not a big deal, like not a big deal, but like the depth at which you feel that sadness as a parent is wild. And I feel like it was the equivalent with this, which is like, man, I remember there was a day when I was feeling down on the streets I was in Paris for a year, and just whatever, bad day at work, and someone on the street was like, hey, Josh from the browser company, right? Like, man, I'm so excited, like, man, and that like the high from that and the motivation you get, and so. It was low. It sucks, to have the reaction that it did to some people. But I also think it's kind of part of the highs too. My point about the kid is you don't get the highs without the lows. And so for me personally, even though it hurt and there's certain things that I regret I did communication-wise, or it's sort of, I knew it was coming, and I felt like it was part of the privilege and responsibility that I and we have gotten so far, and we owed it to be transparent. The team bit was the hardest bit.
Yeah.
That was the hardest bit, because I think in some ways I was more prepared for it. In some ways, again, like if you go back to our YouTube channel, the first video is a video called The Internet Computer. Like for me, I've been like, we've been wanting to do the same thing for a long time. And so for me, it feels so obvious that like this is going to be painful in a lot of ways, but of course we got to do it. But, I can't control the emotions of, 85 people, and I think for better or for worse, and it depends on the situation. I'm a tuning fork. I'm someone that feels other people's emotions a lot, and so that was the hardest bit, was really just like seeing how bummed out people on the team got, questioning, are we doing the right thing? Do we let people down? So yeah, I don't think there's any sugarcoating. It's not fun. But again, going back to that kid analogy, is like, oh man, seeing that first like user feedback report coming on the new product that was positive, just like the joy I got, it just hits different. So I know that was rambly, but that's probably how I feel, is a rambling set of emotions related to it.
That's very honest. Nia.
Yeah, so like I know you mentioned that like Arc is not going away. So like I'm assuming that there's a synergistic relationship between like Dia and Arc, and I'm just curious to see how you see it, because like for me, like I'm a everyday Arc user. Like I use it all the time,
Awesome.
Every single day. And like I think for me, when I first used it, I was like, oh, this is like great for my ADHD multitasking like thing, but like that probably wouldn't be great for like my mom.
Right.
So I looked at Dia and I was like, oh, this is something that like my mom or my grandma can use. And I'm just wondering if you see it like that, or if you see it differently, or.
Yeah, I mean, we're still figuring out what Dia is. So to some extent, I don't know the exact answer, but at a conceptual level, my aspiration is that I really want to have, like as you said, is like, we had this line early on, which I still believe, which is like the idea of a general purpose web browser is flawed. It's part of the reason, mentioning about personalization is just like, you are so different than your mom, so different than him. And like the idea that there's one rectangle for all of us, all the different jobs, all the different everything, there's just one, that just never made sense to us. And so while I didn't know that what the products would be and when, or what would work or when didn't work, that's why we never changed the name of the company to Arc. I mean, we always thought like the browser company would have different product lines for different people, even if we didn't know exactly what. So the intention is earnest and true, which is, yes, Arc is beloved by a certain type of person for a certain reason. And I hope that we can keep that forever. And I hope that this second product appeals to a much different and broader audience than Arc. And if anything, that's been one of the hard things about messaging the second product is I want everyone to try it if they want, but I can't even go to Arc people and be like, you're going to love this new thing. Because it's like, you already love that thing, and we want you to keep loving that thing. This is for other people. So for what it's worth, one of the reasons that this whole second product has been difficult is like, I totally get the people that like spewed the most hate at me and us after announcing a second product, like putting myself in their shoes, I totally get why they feel that way. VC-backed startup being like, oh, it's not going anywhere. And so I wish I could say something that was like, look, with all of the intention and our board of directors and our team, like we've always believed in a multiple product line company. I totally get how maybe the way that we rolled it out or the kind of heuristics of who we are as a company, that may be unbelievable, but that's the intention. What I don't know yet exactly is like what that Venn diagram is of like who Dia will appeal to and why relative to Arc, but the intention is it's fairly different.
Thank you.
Cool. Soren.
You guys have been talking about like personalization, talked about like the web being like under siege in a sense.
Speak up, sorry.
I'm curious, like, to put pressure on messaging or like branding of what the new thing, and you talk about the new thing, and the company's name, Browser Company. Do you even think the word browser is like the right word for the new thing? It's like you're kind of avoiding like what, at the core of it actually is.
Well, this is one of the things about the Browser Company is we called it the Browser Company because we never thought we were building a browser. It was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, This was like, you got to incorporate, we were, it was pre-COVID, we're like, we're all in New York, meet in New York. We're the browser, saw a gargoyle in a building and had an old name like that, the Browser Company of New York. But the reason was like, again, if you go back to the internet computer video at the beginning of YouTube, it was like, my wife is in here for 7 hours. All of her apps and files are here. That's a computer. That's an operating system. I don't care what you want to call it technically. This is her computing environment. And so the browser was a little bit of a misdirection. So in that sense, it's been like, it's always felt a little weird as a name to us. The thing we are debating, like literally right now, like I literally had an hour conversation walking around Brooklyn about this today, is what is the label? Fine, whatever your history of the Browser Company name, no one gives a shit. What do you call the product? Is it a browser?
Yeah.
Like, what is that, noun? Is it a browser little adjective? Is it some new noun? Is it some noun in another category? That I don't know the answer to, but the thing we want to do differently is, to a fault, we didn't really think about the marketing for Arc. I know it sounds crazy, but it really was just like, we want 10 people to love this, and then 100 people, and then it kind of just like had a life of its own. But we never had a marketing page. We really still don't in the traditional sense. And so one of the things we do want to do differently this time is say, what is the narrative? How do we want to talk about it in a much more precise way? And so I don't know the answer, but I promise this time before we launch the product, we will figure it out versus waiting until later. Because that was one of the things that was one of the challenging things about Arc. For those of you who love it, I'd be really curious, if someone off the street is like, what is this thing? Why do you love it? It's kind of it's hard to do it concisely. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it definitely, browser has always felt like a funky word to us. But I predict we will keep it for this new product for the familiarity, much like the, pick your favorite product to change things. It typically uses a noun that's familiar. What do you think? I'm curious what you think, though.
I mean, I think of Arc as a browser.
Yeah.
A beautifully designed one. I use it every day as well.
Awesome.
But you're talking about LLMs, you're talking about all the new technologies you can use, and it's just going to reconstruct the way we use the web.
Yeah.
So it's just a fun question. I mean, that's why I figured you've been talking a lot about that.
Yeah.
Just like, what is the new word for the thing?
Yeah.
And I didn't use your new product, so I don't know what I can't give you that. But yeah, it's a fun branding. That's like one of the funnest things to kind of explore, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what one word can we use?
And I will say that is one of the things that makes me, is like Reggie's question about the web ecosystem. What is it going to be called? Personalization. It's just like, I can't even get paid to do this. Like, it really is just one of the, it's just crazy. It's just, there's so much stuff to figure out that feels new and different, and it's very energizing.
Browser for O Mini. Okay. I'm looking at you.
Me?
Yeah.
Hey, So you guys, your products are, I guess, designed to be the way that people interface with the internet, and you choose what to display and show people. So how do you think about building and maintaining trust with your users? Is that something that you think about a lot in terms of, present or, yeah?
Yeah. In fact, that was related to Reggie's previous question, and something I said before about almost browser companies, a reaction to our first 10 years in the industry was when we started the browser company, and again the ambition being like, oh man, we want this to be a new computer or whatever heady philosophical thing we believed is like, I hate most tech companies and I don't trust most tech companies in my life, and so we're just a bunch of randos. How are you going to show up and be like, you should trust your entire life to us?
Yeah.
And our answer was like, well, I can't think of a one-liner or paragraph or essay that any tech company could write that would have changed my mind on that. And so for me, when I have my own conception of okay, which tech company, if a friend was like, hey, we're the good people, like good humans, where should I go work tech company-wise? I would answer based on the people that I've met there. So I think a lot of people today know the browser company through YouTube videos or tweets or whatever. The whole purpose of that was not marketing. It was actually trust building. The whole idea was, okay, if you're going to trust us, you got to get to know us, because we're going to fuck up and we're going to do they're going to be, and so you have to hopefully have reps with us. Not everybody, but as many people as possible use our product. Can we show authentically who we are? Can they see and build the trust with us, so that if it ever comes to something that's really tricky, there's all right, that's not good. But I like these people, or I trust these people. I get a sense of these people and their values. So that's why actually when you come back around, it's like, hey, we're doing a second product. That was, that's tough, because it's like, oh, we anyways, I don't mean to be a sob story about that, but the way we did with Arc, and I hope to do in the future, is just putting ourselves out there, imperfections before stuff is done. Even in the transition, when we actually just thought we were redesigning Arc, that's why we did this little podcast lo-fi thing. It was just not this is nerve-wracking. Something big is going to change. Let's just get it out there right away, more than we normally would. So I don't know if that's the right way, and I think in many ways what worked for us 5 years ago may not work for us now, but that's how we've thought about it.
Cool.
And I think about this a lot. It's what would get you to trust OpenAI right now?
OpenAI is nothing without its people,
No,
brother.
and I don't mean that as shade against OpenAI, but just yeah, I mean, think about it. Tech, for better or worse in our culture right now, more than ever before, especially if you think some of these personalities that are out in the news beyond just tech, is how do you, it's a really interesting, another one of these really interesting questions that how do you build trust when we've all been burned so many times in so many different ways.
Not UBI.
Yeah, I got nothing on that.
Wouldn't you kind of argue that part of the Silicon Valley ethos is a sort of default kind of trustless state? And I don't mean that in kind of the Web3 sense of the code is the law, etc., but literally in sort of its own projected inevitability, they don't value trust because it's already sort of top-down distribution of convenience. So I don't even know if they care about that question.
Yeah, potentially.
Trust always feels like a sort of newcomer's dilemma, not an incumbent dilemma.
Yeah, it's interesting because even just thinking about OpenAI, they go out of their way to do live streams and share things, and yeah, so I think it probably depends on the company. The other thing it's hard to know is that because everything is so out in the open now with Twitter and just our media environment, is people see what doesn't work or isn't working, and then I sometimes sense that certain companies will react to that, but they don't really mean it. It's almost transactional. They figured out you can't do that anymore, so they're going to be the company that does the other thing. So that's the thing that I also find I heard too is when do you know if someone's being honest about what their attempt at doing that? But do they generally care? I don't know. I haven't spent it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I said, trust me, bro, type shit,
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
And take a step back.
Okay.
And understand how you got to your mindset. Let's say in your 20s, you were doing your jobs and doing all that. What brought you to the current mindset you're in? And how you got to this stage?
A specific part of mindset, or what do you mean?
I'd say just like what decisions got you to where you are now. Let's say like practices or like the people you were with or anything that comes to mind that sticks out.
It's hard to not make these sound like fortune cookies.
Maybe first founding and then joining Facebook. That could be helpful.
Yeah, I'd say one thing my wife told me the other day, she's like, "Oh, you really don't mind failing." And by the way, my wife is the fucking best. She meant that as a compliment. But I do think there's been a part of me, I've always been a hands-on learner, for example. And so I think there's just something wired in me, which is just like, I learn, again, realize, even the prototyping, assuming you don't know, has always felt very natural to me because I'm like, all right, go try it, you're going to mess up, do it again. So I think in general, I've been someone that has always kind of put myself out there, and that's felt very natural to me. I think the like following the people as fortunate, like really, and so to make it very tangible, the way I found tech was, I was in college, I had 3 internships I hated, I had this existential crisis about what I was going to do in my life because I thought each of those summers I was going to find my thing and I hated it. I randomly went to one of those guest lectures on campus. There was a professor named Robert Putnam from Harvard who came to guest lecture on Bowling Alone. And I was like, everything this guy is saying resonates with my worldview and everything I've learned in my life. I went up to him after the lecture and I was like, what should I do with my life? And he was like, I have no idea who you are. But if you liked my book at this lecture, there's a guy in New York that started a company after he read my book. That guy was Scott Heiferman. That company was Meetup. So I went to intern at Meetup in New York City right before my senior year, knowing nothing about tech. At Meetup, you have to go to meetups as an intern and new employee. So I went to an event like this. I met my eventual co-founder. We went to another event, which was like a hackathon on Meetup. We did a hackathon. We won the hackathon, and that is why my first startup, and then we got introduced to Evan Williams and all those Twitter guys, and the rest is so. To me, what that started with was putting myself out there, but really just like following my curiosity on people. And that, in that case, was Robert Putnam, and then meeting Scott Heiferman and being like, this guy's cut different. So, again, I recognize it's a fortune cookie, but I really think just like the people, I've always been surprised at like the ways in which the people kind of come back too. So, I think that's my best shot at answering the mindset.
That's a perfect answer. Yeah.
He's a school browser ambassador.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Devin.
I want to talk about the messaging bit, which we were just talking about a little bit, and I'm glad you brought up the notes from a CEO, like the podcast which you all did on a lo-fi basis. I think I saw a tweet of yours which was like, my New Year's resolution is talk less about the product that I'm building.
Yeah. I'm
curious because to me, as one of the, again, people who love Arc and use it very regularly, that was amazing in trust building, right? Like I know people by face, I'm like, oh, okay, this thing is going to be more about onboarding because this person is talking about it. So like, I already felt like, take my data. Even though I didn't feel this way about a lot of other companies with a huge asterisk. But I'm curious how you see that kind of, one, why you kind of came to that conclusion of like, okay, this year I'm not going to talk so much about this shit. But also two, like how you see that messaging, because it's hard to scale, right? It's like, it's human. So like, okay, I'm talking to you, you see me, you see that I'm this person working on it, but how do you scale that, especially at the ambition that browser company has, which is you want to make a new, not browser, but whatever, something that everyone uses in the world, grandmother's 2 children. So like, I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you've thought so far.
Yeah, and okay, so the question is, I recently tweeted like, hey, I'm not talking right now. Why did I switch to that mindset?
Yeah.
First of all, I have no idea what's the right one. With some kind of a funk, but I think that
he was just vibing. Yeah, he was just vibe posting.
No, I think there are a couple things. There's the first is there's someone in our on our team this week that there's something really important I need to talk to them about. It's not bad, but it's just like there's a problem we got to solve related to the product and technical challenges, and he just had like a tough week outside of work, and it's just like. It's just not, read the room, it doesn't matter how important you think it is, it's not the moment. And so I think coming off of as well-intentioned as we were, the overwhelming and intense reaction to the fact we were building a second product, and then I think specifically we are like sharing our enthusiasm, our authentic enthusiasm, which is because again, the reason the way we've talked publicly, I think, has resonated because it's always been really real. It's you can't help but perform even if you don't think you are because you're doing a video, but like within the bounds, like we've always just been really authentic about what we're sharing. And so the authentic truth right now is like, I feel like I'm 13 again, inspired, and I want to talk about that, but it's not reading the room in terms of the people that we've been building for and how they're receiving that. And so I think part of it was just like a little bit of hopefully humility to be like, shut the fuck up for a second and like just appreciate and recognize that what people are saying and feeling, again, this is all web browsers, no one actually cares, but in the realm of what we do. So I think that was part of it, of just kind of being respectful and honoring the like how people are feeling right now about us or about me. And I think the second is with Arc, one of the first things we did with storytelling was not video, it was actually we would share these very half-baked prototypes that the theme of them was actually these all failed. So we would always share these prototypes, and we're not going to do this, but we thought we were going to do it, so we're just going to share a video. And that got a lot of interest early on in the browser company before we had a product, because we were just like sharing these hopefully semi-interesting prototypes and people would react to them. And for a bunch of reasons, like kind of not possible or as possible right now. And again, putting myself on the other side, barring being able to do that, my opinion would be like, will you just show me the damn thing? You know, like stop talking, show me the damn thing. Where with Arc, at this equivalent stage, we were just showing like volumes of prototypes and things like that, which we can't do anymore. So I think the combination of reading the room coming out of the announcement that we're switching to Dia, combined with the fact that we cannot be as open with what it is, we can always have these like things that probably sound very high level and vague, was just sort of like so close, just like kind of let the work do the talking. And then I think there's something again, like I work for President Obama, like my politics are not the current climate, and there's just a lot of noise right now in a way that like, we started the way that we talk in COVID, it was in COVID, we're earlier stage companies, so like don't get me wrong, we are going to be as out there and open and hopefully in really new ways this time around, but I just wanted to take a beat until we can actually show the work that we've been working on.
Los?
Hi. So pretty much I want to go back to like the 10,000 douse thing where it's like you're just like super geeked to like get like 10,000 downloads, you don't even like care who people are, and then that ends up feeling different. That resonates with me like literally like right now, Yeah. And I feel like everyone is like always telling me as advice that I need to choose like target audience better, and also people are telling me that like I need to know what I want in a partner. Two different things.
Oh yeah. Happy Valentine's, everyone.
But I realized I was like I think potentially some people just straight up just know what they want, but I like never do. But I did start like getting like some understanding of like who I might be interested in, like from going on dates, actually, which was a new thing for me. So pretty much, I'm curious, like for you.
I have no idea where this is going to go.
We're doing something called the weave right now. Sorry, perfect. So pretty much, I'm curious. Like, it seems like for you with Dia, like you have like come up with like all the target audience now, where it's like I know who these 10,000, like 100 people like want to be. Like, what changed with you where it's like, okay, now I was able to figure out like what I'm looking for with this target audience.
Beautiful people.
All right.
I'm never calling on you again.
So the question is, how do I know, like, who are the first 10,000, or who do I think they are relative to the first time?
Yeah, it seemed like in the beginning you didn't care who they were, and like it seems like now with Dia, it seems like you know who you want them to be.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, there's one moment that was when I partially realized we got to build a new product, and so I hope this answers your question spiritually. I can weave too. Man.
Yeah, you can weave right back. Why the fuck not? Lo, sit down. You're done. Stop standing up.
I have this friend from college who was my roommate actually in New York when we moved. Best man at my wedding, godfather of my kids. Like, I love this guy. And he's been my number one supporter across my phases, ups and downs. Like, he's my guy. And I realized, he has Arc Search on his phone, but I realized like he wasn't using Arc. And I kind of got mad. I was like, are you kidding me? And I just talking through with him why, I was like, oh, we're never going to get him. Like this, it just doesn't speak to him. And doing that with a few other people in my life, because again, you're like, I don't know about you, I've always kept my work and personal life very separate. Very, very, very separate. And so it's not, I don't usually, when I'm hanging out with people in my personal life, like talk about work or ask about Arc or anything like that. But after that experience with this guy, started poking at certain people that I just deeply care about and realizing just like, they want to support me and they've tried and it's just not for them. So I think at a very personal level, that was sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. But, so that's at kind of like at the lowest level. At the highest level, like there's some aspect of Arc that is very techy. And I think we do techy in a different way. Like I think we have more humanity and more friendliness, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty complex, geeky product. And I really just, when I thought about my favorite products personally growing up that inspired me and still inspire me, there's this kind of essentialism to them. And I think there's just this part of me as a craftsperson that wants to, the same way I wanted to prove to myself that I could build something that 10,000 people love. My instincts and faults with Arc have always been like too much and too, like all over the place and all the things. I just want to like almost personal challenge to myself, try to build something that is more essential and more kind of focused, such that these people that love me but never would do Arc would resonate with it.
Yes.
How has being a father, being a husband, influenced or changed the way that you approach building a team, collaborating, building product?
Yeah.
Compared to when you first started out?
I think I really hope I don't sound too cliche all the time. I honestly, on the tough days, it puts it in perspective a lot more. Especially I'm someone that's hard to like turn my brain off sometimes. And to this day, like my now 2 sons, like are the only things that can like zap me down into the moment reliably. And so I think just like at a personal level, getting home and getting zapped down into those little moments has been very grounding, has been very energizing, has been huge. There is a little bit where I'm like, I want like, Sebastian came in the other day, he's like, what you doing? I was like, oh, I'm working. He's like, why are you working? And like, you start getting these like very existential, like, but I really do.
I have to feed you.
Yeah. I literally was like, capitalism man. Like, but they're at least for my personality, there is some part of me that's like, wow, when Sebastian's like 13, what do I want to say I was doing in those moments? And there's some part of me that has been, I think, was emboldened to do Dia I think there's some connection there, directly or indirectly, between really starting a family and being a father and saying like, come on, this isn't it. We got to go for it again. And then in terms of like day to day at the company, I'd like to think I was a relatively empathetic, understanding leader, but I think my empathy meter has, especially for the parents at our company, like I just cannot get So I think the empathy for realizing like you don't know what's going on in someone's life outside the office, and like just always holding that is something I think I did in the past, but I think I do a lot more now.
Cool.
Yeah, so when you go off to accomplish something really ambitious, there's a lot of ambiguity, and like a lot of the time building the product is just like 6 weeks, prototype, loose goal, scratch that, let's do it again. Like, who are the kinds of people you hire? Like, how have you found building a team who's comfortable in ambiguity for years, working on something that the answer will not become apparent immediately? Versus a culture where maybe it's like rapidly iterate on a very clear goal, and it's just like very short feedback cycles.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we find
those people? Like, what are the kind of people you found who are like really successful at the browser company?
Yeah.
How'd you find them?
Yeah, I think you're totally right that I think the 3 attributes are, one, comfort and ambiguity. Not even comfort. I don't like not being in ambiguity. To me, ambiguity is like possibility, and that's what's so exciting. And so I think that is definitely one thing we look for. The other one is I said it before, the multidisciplinary. Like, I don't care if you call me an engineer, designer, data person, like that's not how I think about myself. I want to make something awesome and I'll do whatever it takes. And then the last thing is the humility. You need to believe, like we have people here that are like some of the best I've ever worked in my career, and their number one professional struggle is they don't think they're good. And that is like sort of an attribute, for better or worse, of browser companies, people that are wildly talented, I think, but like don't think they are. So those are the three things, and I think probably this goes back to the like trust building and being open. Is I kind of think we've had some bat signals accidentally as a company because we've been so open about what we're doing and our values that I think it's sort of, and I think it's very clear from the outside that we're sort of just winging it and going all over the place and get criticism for that. That I think actually it's been easier than I thought to hire people like that, because I think we probably, I mean, you know better than I do, give off a little bit of those vibes externally. But I think there's something, if I were to reduce it to one, there's something to like, I've never quite fit in the roles like in the professional world in some way. There's like an unease with their past and what they want to do and what do I, you know, that's kind of a common, I think, attribute of people.
Mutts.
Yeah. I think I want to ask a question about like branding or marketing.
Yeah.
Meaning, I think I'm not from a technical background, but like 2 years after college, I think I always like join a startup and think they have a great vision, and I always just work with like 2 engineers or 3 engineers. I think what they always telling me to do is, hey, we build this, make people know, like, make it out there. I feel like I'm always like, oh, I used to think by having a good product is enough, like showcase on social channels people follow. But I think like in today's world, it's like just hundreds of products are launching like every day, right? Like, it's very hard to even just stand out without like a very intentional marketing or branding. And I feel like a lot of things you did is like very accidental, such as like building public or doing like amazing YouTube channel, YouTube videos or podcasts. But like maybe accidental, but it's actually a great strategy, like great mindset. So would you like to share something behind those kind of thinking? Like, hey, we're not doing like marketing intentionally, but at the same time, we're able to just create amazing content or things people like to watch, like get our brains out there.
Yeah. So I want to be clear. It's not. I don't want it to seem like, oh, we didn't try to. Like, we made a bunch of YouTube videos, hired an awesome videographer, put a lot of effort into this, but like it was an accident. Like, no, it was very intentional. I think the benefits of it. We had like certain goals of doing it, and there were all these like compounding benefits that we didn't know were going to be there. But it was definitely intentional. Again, mostly around the trust thing. I mean, again, I can't. We just hired really good people, but I think if there was one kind of like, if like you know, leave with one thing, I think we've always thought a lot. There's this woman on the team named Nash who's been with us for a while. It's just a great example of a mutt, like the muttest of all mutts, and that's a compliment. And she's always like, she summarizes like inversion and inverting what people expect in certain areas. Because in many ways, like even the video strategy was like, it was a time of very polished company blog post with no authors that didn't say anything, you know, big launch events. And so the kind of like video, lo-fi, multiple people on the team, that was sort of inverting what corporate comms were at the time, or us trying to. And so many of the kind of marketing type, brand type moments that people probably are familiar with, there was some idea around inversion in there as well. So it's not like some hard fast rule where we're like, oh, how do we invert this thing? But if I had to simplify your very big and hard question, I'd probably say inverting what people expect and surprising people has been probably the thing that's worked the best. But I think the inversion bit.
Get people to share on behalf of you. Get people to tell their friends who tell their friends who tell their friends too. It happens, not just online.
Jonathan.
Is there another beer back there? No worries in that.
I feel like, so it's fair to say that Dia is like a browser with some element of AI involved.
Yep.
Okay. So I feel like I am always trying to pull myself out of this like just bias of people who are pro AI, just definitely, period, no questions asked. And I think with this tension that I think is true, which is you're trying to scale to your friends who didn't use art for some reason, when you bring an emerging technology that's not like consensus good, default good, you have like the work of trying to not come from a place of like, wait, but it's good now. And I guess I'm just like genuinely really curious how you think of the like narrative of the person who is going to see AI in a browser and be uncharitable immediately towards it, while also holding attention the fact that you need to target a wider audience.
Yeah.
And I think there's like a lot in that, and I'm just genuinely like curious how you square those two kind of like at-tension realities.
Yeah, and sorry, if I understood, the question is, how do we make AI exciting, or AI-powered things exciting to people that may be skeptical, or what's the...
Approachable. Like, I think it's just, there's an uncharitable take, which is like, the browser has AI in it.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Yeah.
There's a better version of that, which is the like narrative.
Yeah.
Who is the kind of person who uses a browser for which the tool itself is desirous?
Yeah.
The desire narrative. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Well, you're hitting on kind of like the existential question for this new product, so I don't know, like, we'll find out.
Go work at browser.
I'd say the one thing that's, because like I've been on my own journey with AI and like my excitement or not excitement around it. I think it's been really eye-opening to me to talk to people in high school, college, and watching the way that they use ChatGPT chat, and it's just so. I think in many ways it's like, for so many people it's so obviously how you talk and use your computer that I'm much more interested in identifying and noticing those edges, which actually there are a lot of people now in the right demographics, and trying to understand what have they found. What are they doing? Because it's so inefficient. Like, I myself have gotten lost in all the things I can do with it. And it is so clunky and insane that to get such wild outputs that I've never felt my computer do before. I have to do that many things. And so the key word that you said that is very much how we think about it is approachable. Right? If you think about like the original PC applications in the command line and then that jump to the GUI, that's what we think about. And so I think that AI is extremely valuable, and I think if you talk to people outside of tech, just go to pick your campus, and you see and watch how they use ChatGPT and think about it, I think it's hard not to be like, oh my goodness, of course. Well, who knows if it should be in a browser, who knows how we can do it, but the value is there today, and it is not accessible, and it is not approachable, and it is not human, and that is the challenge. Can we pull it off? Does it really need to be in a browser? How are you going to get... There are a lot of questions, but I think... I think unfortunately the industry narrative and the industry echo chamber has masked how special and wildly valuable and full of potential these LLMs and adjacent things are today, because all of the narrative and industry stuff is annoying and all of those things. If we do our job, it's kind of like we're going for that kind of iMac approachable out of the box.
Zane.
Yeah, so as a company that is, and this might be another existential question,
I got my
as a
beer, I'm
company
ready.
that's not working on like the frontier side of developing your own LLMs, working with novel like base layer technology here, what do you think is giving you the advantage to go in, build this, I don't want to use the word wrapper, but like this,
you can say wrapper,
container for this technology in a way that's going to be advantageous versus somebody like building the deeper tech?
Yeah, okay, so a few things there. One is, and this actually kind of relates to one of your questions in the past, honestly right now, personally, I just trying to make something that I love and people love. So not really thinking too much about the like, hey, in 5 years, how are we going to beat Meta or whatever? Just like, let's really just focus inward on making something we love. So that's that question. On the tech side, we are definitely not training our own models, but actually one of the like draft blog posts, if I had a blog in time, would be I think the new vertical integration, like in the same way that Apple kind of vertically integrated hardware to software, I think will be every feature is going to have a fine-tuned model associated with it. And so actually one of the things that we've done is we're doing a lot of fine-tuning when we have a specific feature in the product we want, fine-tuning it to that specific feature in a way that folks like Cursor do. And so while that is not having your own model, it does mean that we're trying to create a data flywheel and make it really feel like, again, this underlying LLM or ML model was designed just for this feature. And that's actually that was one of the biggest unlocks, because I was very big on like, we are not AI researchers, we cannot do anything in that realm. And then actually, as soon as we started saying, well, okay, you don't have to go all the way you don't have to go that low. So that's been a big unlock, and I think that is a thing that will become in 5 years. Everyone is used to, for most features, having some sort of fine-tuned model to that purpose. But I think the most important thing is what you said, which is our bet is that it's an interface problem. Right? That's why I find actually, as much as like people talk about the iPhone, and I think actually the iMac, if you go back and like think about when the iMac came out in computing history, they were pretty proud of like, yeah, it's just a computer. It's just made for the internet age. It's super friendly. It's really easy to use. And that is actually not only enough, that is maybe the most worthy if you want to accelerate personal computing. And so we could be wrong. It could not be defensible. It could, everyone could copy us, who knows. But our bet is that this is a human problem. This is an interface problem. This is a storytelling problem. And the combination of being really, really great there and excellent there, combined with fine-tuning these models for features in a way that creates a compounding benefit over time, will be enough. But again, we're kind of in the like, fuck it, almost artistic expression mode of like, let's just be really proud of this thing and make it really great. And if Sam Altman copies us or something, like we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But like, we would have made something really great that they want to copy, and don't think that far ahead. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, if I could ask another one.
He's the boss. I don't care.
On this like storytelling side, just in terms of leverage, just like sheer leverage, what do you think is important for telling the story, and why do you think it's going to catch this viral flame that is so important to the masses of people versus what's currently in place?
I don't think it can be one thing or will be one thing. So I think we're going to have to I think that's what's so hard about sticking this landing, is we sort of going to have to be excellent across so many of these things. It needs to just actually be very valuable. Like that's the hard. I mean, I don't know about you. I think there are, on one hand, the number of AI tools that actually are reliably valuable in a very dramatic way. So that's hard enough. Even if you can make that value in a very novel way, making it approachable to people like my college friend who thought art was too complicated. And then even if we can do that, it's just the list goes on and on. So I think you're hitting at the right questions, and I don't have answers to all of them, but yeah, it's a tall task.
Cool. I wanted to end the conversation, and it's kind of perfect actually, because you talked about being in the Obama White House. You talked about sort of a sense of just kind of building things that you're proud of, the humanities and like sociology background. Obviously, there's like a lot of people in tech going into government with this administration, like all politics aside. I'm curious, like, about your time at the Obama White House, just like a couple lessons, and then also how you viewed sort of like your intersection of technology and work and sort of like service, because I think that's something that a lot of folks are thinking about, whether it's in agreement with the current, president, or even just as they think of what happens like next in their own values.
Yeah.
That was a surprise question, by the way.
Yeah. It's a great question. There are a lot of questions in there. Maybe I'll answer the first one, and then you keep asking me follow-ups if you want. I think, I think the thing in retrospect that was so memorable about the experience and altering for me was, at that point, I'd only worked in tech, right? I left school, started a tech company, went to work at Facebook, and just for the first time, it sounds crazy, working with people who didn't care about technology, that got, degrees in health or were experts in housing, and just like kind of I didn't realize how much of a bubble I was in at the time. And that was extremely instructive to me about understanding who I was, what I wanted, what was possible. So I don't think you have to go to the White House to do that. But at some point, again, this is the part of me that feels like a mutt myself. Not being in tech was really the biggest thing that experience gave to me. And then again, like I am an idealist, I'm a romantic at heart, and I think it's cool to be around people that really have dedicated their life. They just care so much about people that are not themselves, and that's a very inspiring environment to be in. But I mean, there were so many kind of specific learnings there, but I'm grateful for the time.
I think there's an interesting thing around sort of like service, right? Like famously, and taking it at face value, like A16Z talks about venture being a service business, right? They service founders. If you build for people and not just like directly for AI use, right? Like theoretically, you should be in a service mindset. Yeah. I think like the most striking thing about going to Tokyo was how everything is a service mindset. Not to be that guy talking about Tokyo. Yeah. But I find that tech people are incredibly self-centered.
Yeah.
And I was having an existential crisis in the shower yesterday, and because I was just like, I don't think most tech people care about people.
Yeah.
Like, period. You know, and I'm curious, like, as you told the story about your friend not using Arc, and you're like, he will use Dia.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like that's a very personal relationship, but that's a clear care about a person having a certain type of experience, right? What did sort of like the government time of like care, and how did that transfer over to how you kind of view technology?
Yeah. I want to respond to something else you said, but I can answer that after. But on the service, I definitely think like the thing when I walked away from the government was like, man, there's so much structural. We got to get to a point culturally where it is desirable and aspirational to go work for the government again, because the government is us.
100%.
And there's so many structural things in the way and cultural things in the way. But that was like my number one, like if I could fix everything and be like, how do we get our best people wanting to work for us, for the government? I don't have an answer there, but I think a lot of the issues that you're hearing pointed out now or previously can kind of stem back from the like, there's this us versus them mentality with the government, which blows my mind. Like it is us. And so that is the thing that I walked away being like, I already had that personally because of my upbringing, but like how do we get that structurally and culturally back into something that people are proud of, like that was earlier in the century. In terms of on a little bit of a dark note, the thing that I've been struggling with is I grew up, so my mom worked for the city government. I was just like, the way I was raised is like that was just sort of who I was and who we were. And I think the thing I wrestle with right now is my feeling right now is just maybe fundamentally people are more selfish than I thought they were, including maybe me, I don't know. So I wish I could give an optimistic take right now, and I am an optimistic person, but I think I don't know how to bridge the way I feel and the way that I think we should all feel with what it feels like a lot of people are demonstrating. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that anyone that voted for Trump is selfish or all the ideas are bad or anything like that, but I think your comment about like do people in tech care and service is like I actually don't know anymore. But at the end of the day, an optimist, so I think it'll work out in the end, hopefully.
Cool. Let's give a round of applause for Tom.
Thank you for coming.